Hi, Marvin.
How are you, Deb?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for taking the time to have a bit of a conversation about this exciting project or program. Um, could I invite you to just introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and then I'll share who I am too.
Great. Thanks, Deb. Yeah, for those of you that I haven't met yet, hi, my name's Marvin Oka. Originally from Hawaii, in case you're wondering what the strange voice is from, where that strange accent is coming from. Although I've been living in Australia now since 1987, really. So, and people say I haven't lost the voice, but that's okay. I don't think. I go back to Hawaii and they say I don't sound, oh, they say I sound Australian. I say, oh, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, my particular background is what's known as neurobehavioral modeling. I'm a professional neurobehavioral modeler. Now, what that essentially means, I've been, by the way, doing this, working with large organizations, multinationals, working internationally with various types of leadership teams for the last 35 years now. And my particular work as a behavioral modeler is what we do is in behavioral modeling is we look at forms of human ability. And our job is essentially replicate it. Now, the challenge is that all forms of human ability require processes occurring outside the awareness of the performer. So you can't just ask, they're unconsciously competent. You know, I often tell people, for instance, just wiggle your fingers and tell me how you do that. And most people can't say. They say, well, you raise your hand and you wiggle. Well, okay, accurate, but uninformative. It's like wonderful, but how do you actually do that? How do you know how to raise your hand this high? Why up? Why not that high or this low or that angle? And how did you know which finger to go first? And how did you know which to follow and how fast? And if you stopped, how did you stop? How did you know when to
I'll say,
stop?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Can't
exactly.
answer
People,
those questions.
that's right. So as a modeler, we're sort of like neurological hackers. What we do is we come in and we look at what's occurring even outside the awareness of the expert. Our job is then, can we language that into a model where we can replicate the behavior or at least some aspect of the behavior? And if we can, then we have a behavioral model. We have something where we can replicate talent or human expertise. Now, having said that, not everything's replicable. You know, I could model an Olympic weightlifter that could lift several hundred kilos over their head. Doesn't mean I can do it, but I can certainly use their performance strategies to improve mine. Now, I've got colleagues that around the world that look at things like obvious things to me, like sports performance, etc. And while that's wonderful, I'm particularly interested in complex decision making. Hence, I get involved with leaders and leadership teams, taking a look at dealing with complex decisions scenarios, whether it's external environment or internal to the organization, where they have to engage in frameworks that allow for not only effective, systemically effective decision making, but also wisdom of decision making. And so my projects for the last 35 years have all been in that way. I've developed using neurobehavioral modeling methodologies around learning, elevating levels of consciousness that I call generative learning. And my particular focus is what's called second order change or transformational change. But we'll talk more about that in just a bit. So hopefully I didn't ramble on too long, Deb, but that's a fast overview of what I do and what I'm on about.
Very exciting. My name's Deb Maes, and I have been interested in leadership development for quite some time. My background in neuroscience and applied psychology has led me to recognise that our leaders are facing quantumly different challenges to in the past, and the same old is not sufficient for helping them deal with the wicked problems that they're going to face before we even know it, it's upon us. And so this also requires a different level of consciousness to be able to respond to problems we can't even conceive of yet. I was very much impressed by your work with the multi-braining. It has been, you know, very helpful for leaders in making wise decisions. And my work now as owner and director, co-owner and director of the Intrinsic Brilliance Institute, which is a platform really for showcasing or bringing to the world people who are doing extraordinary work, hence why we are so honoured to be hosting you, Marvin. That's probably all that I want to say about me. Could you tell us a bit about this program? Perhaps what are the, I know there's more than one intention in the program, not just teaching content, but more will emerge from it. Share a little about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Deb. I mean, there's just so much to this particular program. So it is it's helping really second order change agents, whether they're trainers, facilitators, leaders, coaches, people that have an intention to go out and make a real difference out there in the world, and also to make a living doing it at the same time. And so this is a program for professional neuro-behavioral modelers. Now, let me kind of back up a little bit and give you a bit of a context as to the motivations behind this. As I mentioned previously, my particular area of interest is around second order or transformational change. And that means whole system change. And as an example, in case someone's not familiar with the term, first order change, the best way to understand second order is by contrasting it with first order. First order change is any change inside of an existing system or paradigm or culture or way of thinking. And at best, over the years, I discovered that there's different types of first order change. And it's important to know them, to recognize them. So the first type of change is improvement, where the system actually works better. And it's wonderful. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's times when that's actually that's the go-to, right? If we can just improve the system without having to completely disrupt it and transform it, that's great. And if that works well. But the system stays the same, but it works better. Next would be some form of a fix where the system was working and it's not working so well and we need to get it back. And we see this a lot in organizations where they're looking at things where they might call it things like process improvement or whatever it might be, but many times some processes just have disintegrated over time and they need to come back and reintegrate them, and they'll call them transformational processes, even though they often aren't, to be honest. The next type of first order change is classic rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, which is much ado about nothing. And if anyone's ever worked in large organizations, you know exactly how that goes, where there's lots of activity. And then at the end of the day, after several years later and millions of dollars spent, we're at status quo. It's kind of business as usual. And then the worst type of change, or first order change, is when it actually makes an ineffective system worse, and it makes it even harder to change. It really embeds, it locks in the older system. Now, as I said before, there are times when first order change is exactly what you need, and it's fine, and that's great. But there are other times when the system itself is problematic. And if the system or culture or paradigm or way of thinking is problematic, then that needs to change. And this is now where we're talking about real transformational work. This is what's called second order change. And second order change is a change to the system, not in the system. The system itself evolves to a higher order of consciousness, a higher order of organization, so that it functions with far more sophistication, far more ecology, as we like to call it.
That sounds tricky.
It can be, and it might, and it doesn't have to be when you know how. But it does require a very different way of thinking and a different kind of language. You need a meta language for this. And so I'm particularly sensitive to this when I kind of go out in the world and I look for what has a potential to actually make a real difference out there versus what is in many ways what I see as a dumbing down. Instead of elevating wisdom, a dumbing down of society where the system perpetuates itself. And a couple of years ago, I was exposed kind of in rapid succession, a range of things where people were calling them, quote, were trying to brand themselves, quote unquote, as thought leaders. And I have no problem if they actually are one.
It's very popular.
Exactly.
Every person I meet now on social media is a thought leader.
Exactly. And, I take the words seriously. And it's like, are you actually leading our thinking? Are you actually evolving wisdom of consciousness in society? And I see a lot of things that are basically repackaged, repurposed, old material. I've seen people actually repackage things that literally were shortly after World War II. They like W. Edwards Deming talked a lot about those principles, right? And total quality management way back shortly after World War II. And it's like, this is not thought leadership at all. Now, by and of itself, that's fine. But when I see a dumbing, what the effect on the audience, when the audience walks out thinking, this is I need to do this, even though they're probably not going to do any of it, right? And what they haven't done is elevated in consciousness. The decisions they're about to make aren't going to be any wiser. The system will just perpetuate itself. And in fact, in some ways, if they have a short-term fix, it actually makes it harder for change. People now want, they're not willing, for instance, to go to a program where they want to learn about real leadership, to learn real systemic change, for instance. They want the hacks, they want the quick fixes, they want the 3-step method or whatever it might be. And if someone's out there selling it to them, then it's harder than heck now to actually try and sell them something that's actually going to make a real difference. And so the system just gets harder to work at that point. So when I see those kind of things is when I start to get a little upset sometimes. And I, like I said, last year, I happened to see several of these things all in succession. And finally, I called up a colleague of mine, a good mentor of mine over in the USA, Dr. White Woodsmall, who's I class as the grandfather of professional behavioral modeling, because he was the first one to ever do it as a profession, as an actual job. And I said to Wyatt, you know what, I know we agreed 25 years ago that we would never teach behavioral modeling to people because it's what we do for a living and it's really our competitive advantage. I said, but look, I'm getting on in years. I see the years flying by. I've got a lot of things on my bucket list of projects I think will make a big difference out there in society. And I'm very clear now, I'm not going to be able to do it without colleagues, without a cohort of professionals that are out there have an intention to help facilitate second order change. And so I said to Wyatt, I'm gonna start teaching this. Now, Wyatt's even older than I am, so he agreed. He understood the logic right away, and he's been very supportive in the program, contributing with videos and things of that nature. And
thank you.
yeah, he's been sensational. And so I started saying, well, great, I've got a hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that there are people that are out there, like myself, that have a real intention to do real second order change. And they've got the intellectual wherewithal to know the difference. And what they don't have is a methodology to actually create real second order intellectual property, real second order breakthroughs. They've got the inspiration and aspiration, but they don't have the method. So all they're left with is trying to repackage things or whatever it might be. So I said, well, it's an hypothesis. So I'm going to test. I'm going to launch in classic lean startup language. I'm going to start a minimum viable product pilot. I'm just going to hand select some people and let's just see who shows up. And sure enough, a range of people started showing up. And part of my goal is to create and establish over time, establishing neurobehavioral modeling as a profession, where it becomes a recognized professional field. So just in organizations, just like how in organizations today, we have professional coaches, professional trainers, professional facilitators, there should also be professional neurobehavioral modelers, that if you want to be able to capture talent, if you want to be able to understand in depth the psychology of your customers, if you really want to understand the psychology of attracting and keeping talent in your organization, for instance, you need modelers. You need people that can actually get under the surface and find the things that really make a difference, and to map that and code that. Every organization should have their own neurobehavioral modeling team. Because they don't, they hire people like myself and my colleagues to do the work for them, but they could have it in-house. Having said that, if we have...
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting, Marvin. Can I just check that I understand what you're saying? There was a time where there wasn't a role such as human resource manager.
That's right.
And focus of an organization might have been on production and sales. And then they realized, we have an asset of humans and, we need somebody skilled in doing this. And you're suggesting that the time has come where this is a role within organizations, a key role within organizations, such as a CFO or a HR manager, also someone who's doing neuro behavioural modelling of the expertise and talent within their organisation so that they can keep their IP and skills in their own organisation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just keeping, it's actually creating new property as well, new intellectual property as well, new profiles. So for instance, classic examples, many organizations, for instance, have hired me for a range of types of things. One is the one recent one last year was looking at new forms of leadership. How do we actually create leaders that can run virtual teams, can run teams in an agile environment, autonomous teams, but still, how do you lead a team that is autonomous, but at the same time working within a hierarchy? Right now, so this is an interesting dynamic. You're not going to find this off the shelf. And now the thing is, while you can reach for external behaviors and say this is what X, Y, Z you can do, that doesn't mean that's what actually happens between people's ears. You know, the way I often describe this is saying, if someone wants to come up with a new form of leadership, look, we have about 10,000, pulling this figure out of the air, about 10,000 leadership books available if you kind of look on online. And so we don't need book number 10,001, right? We don't think that's not going to make the big breakthrough, right? What actually does make the difference then? How is it possible we have 10,000 books on leadership and we still are looking for 10,001, 10,002? We're still struggling with developing leadership, etc.
There's a gap in what we know and what we need to know.
Yeah, so the real how. That's right.
Yes, you're talking about a combination of identifying what's already working and is talent, and creation.
That's
creation
right.
Versus just identifying and documenting.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And so, and the thing is, what we, especially in large organizations, for instance, like I said, one of my previous clients, they were asking around, how do we find that kind of leadership? And I said, look, as a modeler, we're not going to make it up, right? We start with what works. So let's just take a look at who do you have now that actually can lead a team inside your organization that you will point to and say, they do a good job, right? And let's start modeling them and see how they do it. And lo and behold, we find not one, not two, but many such leaders. Now, their psychologies are very different, and they have different practices and different methods. So we're finding the pattern, as Gregory Bateson calls it, the pattern that connects. What is it that's common to all of them? And that's going to be the core thing that's clearly the breakthrough, right? Now, the rest is idiosyncratic. The rest is unique to their situation, unique to their personality, their history, etc. But there are certain things that will be there that if you're going to lead a team in this kind of an environment, that will be common. Again, it's not cookie cutting. We're not making everybody the same. Quite the opposite. What we're saying is these are the core competencies, not steps. Right? These are the ways of filtering your world, thinking, processing your world to make the appropriate decision given the context at hand. These are the ways to, quote unquote, lead with all of its dynamic variety that's actually going on. And so when we start to code that, this now becomes very unique profiling intellectual property for that organization. It clearly outlines who's going to be most easily adapted to this kind of a situation. It tells you how to actually set up career development, what is real training and coaching that's going to be required, etc. It tells you a whole range of things. And if that person ever leaves, you've got a profile, you've got a model to work to, right? You can build your bench strength in an organization, and that's just within an organization. And so there's so many things that can be done. Coming back to the original point, look, as independent consultants, facilitators, coaches, etc., you can now, when you learn neurobehavioral modeling, you can now do two things. One, you can offer it as a behavioral modeling research consultancy service, like often what organizations hire me to do, to produce, whether it's profiles or training designs or whatever, career development programs, whatever it might be. Or you can develop your own intellectual property and commercialize it with your own offerings of programs, workshops, coaching services, keynote presentations, a whole range of things built on intellectual property that is unique, that is proven to make a difference because it's started from a behavioral premise of people that can actually produce transformational outcomes. And it's, as you'll discover throughout the program, it is unique to your specific brand and the community that you serve. And so there's, I get so excited because the opportunities get so huge with all of this.
Wonderful. You've mentioned a term agent, change agent.
Yes.
Makes me think a bit of the Men in Black.
I don't mind that.
The word I'm thinking of is catalyst, a change maker. How would you how would I be able to identify if I am a change agent?
Yeah. Look, it starts with, to me, it's a brilliant question, because to me it starts with some core things that are intrinsic to the kinds of people that this kind of a program appeals to. So first and foremost is, number one, do you want to make a difference out there? Now, this, I can spend the next hour talking about the principles of making a difference, because I've actually done modeling around people that are living on purpose, and that sense of purpose, and how always when people have passion and are living, quote unquote, on purpose, there's been no exception, it always has to do with in service to others and making some kind of meaningful difference. Right. So number one, do you want to make a difference? Number two, do you want to live life feeling like what you're doing is meaningful? So it's not just making any old difference, but meaningful difference. Right? Number three, is there, so it's not just a general wish, but number three, do you actually have some connection to, some felt connection to a community, a group, a tribe, if you want to call it, something where you feel like you want to serve? So whether it's, for instance, we've had people that have a calling to want to help parents. We've had other people that are really looking at, frustrated executives. We've had other people looking at middle management, for instance. We've had people looking at the educational industry, where they feel compelled to go there and serve. Right. And so if you feel like, you're there, but you either don't know what to do, or you've been trying and you're frustrated, or, we've also had people that have said, yeah, they've been doing out there, they've been doing this for several years as a job, but somewhere in the back of their mind, they are questioning themselves. They are asking, is what I'm doing actually making any difference whatsoever? And if those kind of things are there, you probably have a psychology that is trying to do second order change work. You're trying to make a difference out there. You want to promote real transformational change, and you might be doing it now, and you'd like to learn how to do it better. You might be trying to do it and not sure if you're doing it well, or you might just be frustrated as crazy. And we've had people that have started with just, it would be great if, but I don't know if I'm someone to do that. And the reason why they don't believe in themselves is because they don't have a how.
Yes.
If you had a how, you'd suddenly believe in yourself. You suddenly go, oh, now that I know how I could do it, I'm going to do it. And we've had several people that actually have risen to that level where they've walked into the program going, I'm not sure if, and then by the end, they've got these sensational projects. So.
I would say my frustration is not around questioning whether it's making a difference and whether it's valuable, the work that I do, but the frustration is around how much work I have to do because I'm all on my own.
Yes.
And I feel like a lone voice in the wilderness amongst those that I work with. And I can see that having a whole community of people and a whole profession that's recognised, where this language, starts to become known and used, and people understand what you do. You don't have to keep kind of reinventing the wheel of selling the why first. Right. People get the why because the profession's there. So I think that there would be many people who experience that frustration of the amount of work that's required when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You've highlighted several things that I want to comment on. So one is you pointed out the role of having the language, and this is very important. So when you're doing second order work, you need to have a meta language, a language about the system and about the work that you're doing. A great cyberneticist of our time is now passed away, Stafford Beer. He had one of his many amazing phrases, and he said, since every system is problematic, he says, if you want to make real change, you cannot use the language of the system. You have to use language about the system. And that is what good second order work does. So you're going to find exposure to a whole new conversational vocabulary around how to go about making second order change and using neurobehavioral modeling in that way. Second point you highlighted, which is so critical, and thanks for reminding me of this. We are building a professional cohort, a community. When you're doing large second order work in particular, you almost never will you ever do it alone. You need colleagues. So hence why I'm also trying to build this professional collegiate network. But even for myself, when I've done large projects, I've had to reach for colleagues to come along as part of the project. And so we run this program. I'm running these MVPs, these minimum viable product pilots, not in a formal training sense. So it's not like you come to a training and you sit, you learn, you practice a little bit, then you leave and hopefully you go out and apply. It's nothing like that. It's an action coaching, very in-depth, more like a mastermind group where we all have a vested interest in each other succeeding. We're all learning and helping each other. We're all sharing our levels of expertise. I am action coaching everybody to learn how to use neurobehavioral modeling. If someone says, well, I don't have a background in any of this kind of stuff, don't worry. We start with where you are. Right. And we work with you accordingly, because to become a good neurobehavioral modeler is a lifetime of development. And so what we can do, though, is get you up to speed very, very quickly, wherever you're starting from. And then we have ongoing support afterwards. So, we can only go so far in the 4 modules that we've got, but we'll get you to the point where you could actually do something, start producing intellectual property right away, start going out making a difference right away. The level of depth, well, that's ongoing. So we've got ongoing webinars. We've got ongoing meetups if you happen to be in Melbourne, and we'll set them up in other places as well, in Sydney, etc. So there'll be lots of things we'll do to support the building of a professional network that's also professionally developing along the way. But yeah, it is very collegiate. And you'll find that as well, a lot of our graduates, one of the things they said was by far one of the biggest value adds that they had was the collegiate framework of just learning from each other. They'll find, you'll see as well on one of the case studies we've just put up online, Jim Karagiannis was saying that lots of times he'd be sitting there and someone would be explaining their project, and suddenly he'd go, "Why, that's a breakthrough for my project." And then he'd be sharing something and someone else would go, "Well, that just changes how I'm going to change my project." And that's how it works. And that's what we want. We want this collegiate group. Collectively, we'll go out and start facilitating second order change out there in society. And that's the plan. That's how we go about it.
So Marvin, could you give me a bit of an overview of what's actually involved in the project? You mentioned 4 modules.
Yes.
And then there is other things around that. What's the length of the program? What's the structure? What kind of time investment's required from me?
Yes, great. Great question, because I've really had to think this one through in terms of how do I make sure everyone's got what they need, but at the same time try and keep it as streamlined as possible. Because, if I had my own way, it would be like, okay, it's a 2-year program, but obviously that's not going to work out there in the marketplace. So it's 4 modules. And they're spanned anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks apart, so that and there's a lot of work in between. So it's not you can't think of it as like a training where you just come, show up, leave, come back to the next session. It's not that. You are developing a professional competency, a whole new set of skill sets. And so the first module is you're going to get exposed to how professional neurobehavioral modeling works. And if anyone ever has a background in things like NLP or anything of that nature, this is not like NLP modeling by any means. It's as soon as you do it for a living, it's a completely different game. And the scale of what you have to do is a lot more sophisticated than just simple competency modeling. So you're going to learn all about how to set up a second order project, behavioral modeling project, what's involved, how to design it so that by the sheer structure or by the sheer initial scoping of your project, it will start going second order right off the bat, just by the way that you think about it. One of the amazing benefits that came out of doing the first pilot test was recognizing when people are actually able to structure their behavioral modeling project starting from finding the second order breakthrough, that's where we're going to model, right? And just coming up with that to begin with, then the initial structuring of the project by and of itself starts making a difference out there in the world, even before they've even modeled. Just the fact that they've even sorted it that way is already news in the marketplace, that no one's thought about it from that perspective and broken it into those kinds of tasks, what we call task decomposition, competency chunks. Right off the bat, that would start making a difference for people. Right? Then the modeling just makes it even better. So the first module is all about how to design your project. So you'll be working on designing it. Then between the first and second module, you'll be going out there and conducting behavioral modeling interviews, behavioral modeling, working with role models, etc., and starting to get some raw data. Because you will learn through the program as well. You will end up with two categories of neurobehavioral models. The first will be a technical model, which is your full competency, your full mapping. Right? This is your raw intellectual property, and this goes very generative now, because this is where you've got breakthrough things. But this technical draft model is usually, if you've done it well, only understandable by other behavioral modelers, because it's full of jargon and code and things of that nature. That's not what you sell. People aren't going to buy that. It's too complicated, right? So then you've got the second class of models, which is how you commercialize and monetize your intellectual property. So you can commercialize it by either simplifying it or only taking one section of it or tailoring it for a particular target market, and then you'll change it for different target markets, etc. And so you'll have 100 ways to commercialize and monetize that same raw intellectual model. So but you have to refine it. So the second module is you're coming back with your raw findings, and I'm going to teach you how to put together a technical model. How do we now start pulling this data together so things start becoming coherent? You start seeing a lay of the land in terms of this is the set of neurological competencies that you've got to work with. Right? This will now inform you to now go out and get refined distinctions. Right? Because your first time you go, wow, what's going on? I'm finding all of this. I don't know how to make sense of it. Good, come on back. We'll make sense of it for you. Right? Now that you've made sense of it, suddenly you'll go, oh, now I see where I really need to burrow in deeper or expand my model or whatever it might be. So you go out and you do the next iteration of modeling. Bring that to the third module. To the third module, we now refine it. Right? We refine it to the point where you start to go, now I see, right, how it's all working together. So between the third and the fourth module, you'll continue to go out and refine it even further, but you'll now also start thinking about how to commercialize and monetize it. Now you're starting to think, now I can start thinking about how I'm going to package it up. And then in the fourth module, we start packaging it up. We start saying, whatever you've got right now, some people will have a lot, some people will have just the surface. You probably have enough to start commercializing up to a point. And we'll start now looking at what kind of ways that you want to put it out there in the world, whether it's coaching programs, whether it's keynote presentations, whether it's training programs, whether it's workshops, whether it's writing a book, whether it's whatever it might be. You will have usually, in fact, invariably, if you've done some behavioral modeling, you will almost always have more than enough to start content marketing, to start actually going out there and just start talking about what you're finding, start doing some things from LinkedIn to podcast to you name it. And you start building a marketplace for yourself right there. So in a period of just 4 modules spanning a couple of months time, people will walk in going, I'm not sure what I want to do, etc. By the time you're done, if you've been doing the work, by the time you're done, it's like, you can start getting out there now. And from here onwards, it's continually building your model and then expanding what other projects you want to do while being supported by this group. So, we don't love you and leave you. If you want to keep going, we're here to keep supporting you. So.
What's the structure for that support post the 4 modules? Yeah,
currently right now, because we are in MVP stage, we are in pilot testing. So keep in mind the way that I'm thinking is, we are working in MVP pilot testing, and then at one point, probably later in next year, 2020, late in 2020, we will have a formal launch of everything. Until then, So all the support is free. It's online webinars, meetups where we actually talk through things, work through projects, things of that nature. Lots of times, as you'll discover throughout the entire program as well, people are often sending me their recordings of their interviews, etc., and I'll get online and coach them through it, or work with them directly with it, which is why we limit the size to the group. This is not a program where you're going to suddenly rock up and there's like a couple of hundred people in this thing. I couldn't support that many at this level of pilot testing. So it's only a handful of people. And so all that goes on, as well as if we run, as we've been doing here in Melbourne, if we have, as long as we're doing MVPs, then, and you happen to be around and you've done a previous program, you want to review, come on in, right? Just come on in and we'll support you. But once we formally launch, then we'll figure out how everything works from there. Once it formally launches in terms of ongoing support, though, it will be we're looking at a professional development, or I should say a professional network membership. And that particular membership will have a monthly price, a monthly cost, but you'll have, scheduled online webinars. There'll be a professional directory. So if people want to find professional behavioral modelers specializing in particular niches, they can just look you up and contact you directly. We're not looking to take any commissions or anything. It's just like, good. We just want to get people out there, not only making a difference, but also making a living doing it. And so we're just trying to do everything we can to try and support everyone to get out there and do good work.
So you're based in Melbourne.
Yes.
And I'm based in New South Wales, as is my business partner. And there is quite a bit of interest, not just in Sydney, but in New South Wales. So you've agreed to come up to New South Wales, near Newcastle, to run the program for us in New South Wales. Thank you for agreeing to do that. It makes it better for the environment to not have all of us going there every time, but just bring you here. So thank you for that. There are details on the website about that program in New South Wales. And certainly we at the Intrinsic Brilliance Institute will be supporting you in how to have a group that supports those there. And can you think of anything else that you would like to share?
Look, yes. The one thing is this, for a lot of people, because this is also, we're still at a minimum viable product stage. And so we're sort of hand selecting people. We're sort of reaching out to our own immediate networks and tapping people on the shoulder saying, would you be interested in this? For a lot of people, in fact, for most people, it's hard for them to initially grasp just how significant being a professional neurobehavioral modeler is. I'm not talking about in terms of status, and I'm saying in terms of capability. What happens, the world opens up like you on insane levels. I tell people, and my graduates now understand this when I actually say this to them now, is wherever you go, there will be opportunities. You will see them as a modeler. You will see them. People will be struggling. They'll be frustrated. They'll be having challenges, and you'll go, I know exactly what to do to actually make a breakthrough here. Now, you don't have to. You want to go where you have resonance, your own internal resonance of who you want to serve, etc. But you will see huge places where you could just make a huge difference if you wanted to apply yourself there. I've seen it where people saying things all the way from, here's something where we don't know how to measure this, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I could do that for you. Right? Recently, I just did a webinar with someone from the cybersecurity industry. And again, I'm continually amazed. Their biggest challenge, the people issue, not the technology. It's the people issue, letting the hackers in, right? And anywhere you will see a people issue or a human issue in play, behavioral modeling can make a difference there, can contribute there. And so I had one of the people in the first group. After the first weekend, he came up to me and he just said, "This is epic." I thought, yeah, good. Okay, good words. Because I've had so many of them actually just say they had no idea that it was this big, like the potential was this big. Your projects don't have to be big projects. They can be very honed in, very specific immediately practical type of projects. But the implications where everything points to is just huge. Your world just opens up on just a massive scale when you realize, wow, what we can do. White Woodsmall says it a slightly different way. He just says humans are capable of amazing things. Right? He says people don't recognize just how much humans can actually do, and we think, all these super performers, all these extraordinary people, they're like gifts from the gods. Well, look, maybe not. From a modeler's perspective, we start with the premise of saying, well, they're human, and if they're human and they can do it, that means it's humanly possible. And if it's humanly possible, we can model it. Now, we might not be able to replicate everything. However, we can certainly use a lot of their performance strategies to improve ours and to actually take us to whole new levels. And so it just opens up doors that are, again, it's hard to fathom if you don't have first exposure to it. So, for people that show up in the MVPs, I'm just eternally grateful. That's why I support them so strongly. I'm just eternally grateful. It's like, thank you for showing up, right? Because it's a leap of faith. And then, and after a while, when they start getting all excited, I go, yeah, great. And they come up and they say, oh, thank you for doing this. And I'm thinking, no, thank you for showing up and having that leap of faith. And now, and now we can have the conversations, and now we can go out and do things together. So that's.
So you've said 3 characteristics of how you would identify if you're right for this: a desire, a passion to make a difference. 2, I think, was feeling purposeful.
Yes.
That what you doing feels like it's your purpose.
Yes.
That it's meaningful to you, meaningful to others. And the 3rd thing, that you have an orientation towards service. There's
Yes.
a community that you see has a specific need or challenge, and you want to serve them in finding that. You also mentioned intellectual wherewithal.
Yes.
And I think perhaps that you did touch on it. People come into the program going, oh, am I biting off something bigger than I can chew? Am I really up to this intellectually? So I think it's really wonderful that you mentioned that these seemingly super beings that are doing extraordinary things, in my own personal work with extraordinary people, they know themselves to be ordinary humans.
That's right. Yes.
And yet they're able to unlock a particular potential that others aren't. And this program is about the how-to of doing that, which is really exciting. Some of the people that I serve, Marvin, are community, political, or business leaders.
Yes.
And they find themselves very busy and full with all that they're doing. I'd love to encourage some specifically to come along. Particularly those who are business owners, business leaders, the CEO perhaps, or the owner. I think that you have given detailed some of the benefits that could come to their organisation for themselves to invest in learning this for their own organisation. Could I invite you, though, just to check that that's really explicit and succinct, because it's that commitment to learning a new profession when you've already got a profession as an accountant or whatever. Why would they invest that time?
Yeah, look, good question. There's 2 aspects to this. So first, when I say, we're establishing this as a profession, you could, if you wanted to, hang out the shingle of being a professional neuro-behavioral modeler. For the most of the people that have come through the program so far, the pilot program so far, a couple of them are doing that, but majority of them are not. What they are doing is putting it as part of their profession. So as a coach, they also work with neurobehavioral modeling as a trainer, facilitator, or designer of workshops. They use neurobehavioral modeling. So one person has an accounting background, for instance, and she's applying neurobehavioral modeling to what she looks in terms of various types of leadership development in that kind of a space. It's not like you're swapping one profession to the other, using it to support the current one that you're doing. So you could think of it in terms of professional development. In the other aspect of what you've just said, to learn behavioral modeling, there's no question. It will take work. You have to put in the effort, because it is a skill, it is a competency, it's a way of thinking, and you have to put in the practice. And if someone's so busy that they can't do that, then look, to be fair to them, they're not going to get a lot out of the program, because it's not, you can't learn about behavioral modeling. You have to do it to actually learn it. So they have to be able to put in the time on this. And if they're going to do it, when people have shown up, they usually have they're usually in one of two places, or one of three places maybe. The first is they're clear what they want to do. It's like, I want to learn behavioral modeling because I want to do X, whatever it might be. So if you're a CEO or whatever it might be, and you think, I want to be able to produce this for my company or whatever, or I want to produce this kind of new offering out there in the marketplace, and I need behavioral modeling to do that, and you're clear, well, great, come in and we've got a specific application. The other aspect is a lot of people don't know what they want to do with it. They just think, I'd love this capability, I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it. Don't worry, by the end of module 1, you'll start focusing in on what you might want to be doing with this thing, and the project will start unfolding accordingly. And then obviously the third type is a subset of that, which is some people are, they kind of know and they're kind of not sure, they kind of have a vague idea. Of course, that gets clarified quickly throughout all of this. So, coming back to your question, why should they do it? There's really only going to be, in my viewpoint, two major reasons. One, you can see how this is going to work for you, and you want to learn it. Or number two, you're not sure exactly what you really want to do, but you want to learn it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're going to come in and think, well, let me come in and see if I like it, this is probably not for you, because we go to work from the word go. It is a pilot test. People are being hand selected. If you come in to this program, I'm going to assume you want to go out and make a difference out there in the world. Mm-hmm. Let's go do it. Mm. And we're from the word go, we are starting, right?
Yes. So. As I hear you talk, Marvin, I'm thinking some people that I work with, they are working hard at a systemic level in their organisation, and sometimes there's a bit of spinning the wheels with that, and it would be really time efficient, great return on investment to have the methodology for the how to identify really what within their systems are going to leverage a really big difference for them quickly and efficiently, and also how to develop the leadership within their own specific context and organisation. And these things, although it will take considerable investment of time in self to develop this capacity, I can see that, like you say, the world then just opens up, the ways in which you can then apply it, not just to your current problems, but ongoingly to new ones that you haven't met yet. So, Marvin, thank you very much for your time. And I really look forward to getting started with you April 17. I'm sure we'll have little bits of communication and instructions before April 17. We have a beautiful venue so that we can all be together in really comfortable surroundings. And I can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Deb. And thank you for promoting this and getting this out there and helping really make a difference by expanding the community on this one. So thank you.
I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Deb.
Bye.
Bye-bye.